Good evening. Welcome to the first ever podcast live stream thingamajigger for Phantom Duels, a Phantom Breaker podcast. I'm your host, KillRodX, or KRX by some other means, and with me tonight, so far, is Kaon. Kaon, how you doing?
Hey, thank you for inviting me, K-Ross. My name is Keon, but feel free to just call me K-Bas.
Drop that bass.
Alright, we were originally going to have another guest for Phantom Breaker Battlegrounds, and unfortunately he has not responded to any of our messages, so tonight is going to be 30 minutes of Phantom Breaker goodness, and K-Bass has a lot to discuss, don't you?
Yes, yes, indeed I do. First thing I'd like to discuss is excuse me. First thing I'd like to discuss is that Phantom Breaker is a fighting game that is developed from the company Five Basic Powers and Game. Sorry, Five Basic Powers, and there are a local, how should I say, anime company that does licensing for music as well as a few visual novel games. It was around, I believe, 2006 that they decided to try to create their own game, which we all know now as Phantom Breaker. I believe Phantom Breaker has had. Oh, sorry.
No, no, it's fine. It's just,
Oh,
I'm agreeing with you. Take your
no
time.
problem. All right, so moving forward, the company had a few issues when it comes to trying to release Phantom Breaker. It was originally released in, I believe, late 2006 for only the Xbox 360 region lock, so they made a really it was really difficult for a lot of importers to get their hands on this game. Not only that, since it was a fighting game, especially on the Xbox 360, and we are aware of how Xbox 360 is not really well popular and Land of the Rising Sun. So Phantom Breaker more or less just haven't really developed a bit of a fan base. Fortunately, I've been able to get my hands on the game, and well, honestly, I gotta say they've done a good job on what they did with Phantom Breaker. The creator, I forgot his name. I'm actually gonna need to research that, but he said that he wanted to make a fighting game that was more driven on people more or less being aware what they need to do and more or less meter management, while still obviously catering to the well-known mechanics that we love in fighting games, like Guilty Gear SRD, excuse me, Guilty Gear SRD's Roman Council system. They definitely have that there, especially the yellow one, which I know a lot of people are really favoring and good to get SRD. But my bad. Let me get back on track. So, Phantom Breaker again hasn't been well known, but really nice made game. It was later on in 2000, I believe, 12 is when they finally decided to release an update to the game called Phantom Breaker Extra, which was made both available for 360 and PS3. And overall, the game has made significant changes. One of the most significant changes is additional four additional characters, as well as an additional style that's kind of hybrid of both the quick and hard style.
And
So moving, go ahead. No,
I was just going to say real quick, going into the history of Phantom Breaker. Yes, Phantom Breaker did come out, and 760 was originally in charge of translating and releasing the game. Unfortunately, 760 went under, and the game is still in production limbo. However, before Extra came out, there was an arcade port called Phantom Breaker Another Code, which improved Phantom Breaker some before we got Extra. Um, I don't think we'll be seeing the arcade port of Another Code anytime soon. And to answer questions in regards to Phantom Breaker Extra, folks, the game is region free. You can digitally download on the PSN if you have a Japanese account. However, if you're looking to get a digital download on the 360, you're going to need to do some networking, or if you want, you can get the game on PlayAsia for a whopping $40. And yeah, going on, you were going to discuss about Phantom Breaker's Extra play.
yes. Well, Phantom Breaker Extra. I first like to make the comment that apparently a lot of people have misconception about Phantom Breaker being more or less how should I say it? I prefer not to use the word sloppy, but let's say unrefined, which really is not the case at all. It does have a lot of mechanics that a lot of them do seem to be taken from a lot of other games. However, the actual application of them are actually very different. But let's see, Phantom Breaker Extra. Let's first go ahead and actually look at the basis of Phantom Breaker Extra. Phantom Breaker Extra, just like the basis of Phantom Breaker, similar to the basis of Phantom Breaker is a four-button fighting game. You have your light, medium, and hard. So, or I think people prefer fierce. I'm going to say fierce. And then you have the SP button. Now, actually, I would like to refer people, if you have the time, to go on YouTube and research a Phantom Breaker extra tutorial that was made from one of our members in Phantom Duel. I believe his name is Mikado. Again, if you have the moment, take a look into that. It'll definitely give you a little idea of how the buttons in Phantom Breaker work. So I'm actually not going to even touch on the basics because I'm actually going to assume that most people are, in a sense, already familiar with the basic controls. However, what I will at least do is at least touch on each of the different buttons and see where their actual purpose significance come from. First being the light attack button. First thing that people notice about the light attack button is that when you do use that, all the hit stuns from that are relatively short, but not only that, when you do actually hit the opponent, it shows a green indication, while all the other buttons will show a different light effect. Now, what's good about a light attack is one, they are obviously the quickest attack, but not only that, there's a special thing where you can actually re-loop chains with the light attacks. Actually, before I may have probably lost people when I say chains. Chain is actually, as I say, pre-assembled attach string and Phantom Breaker. Each different button has its own little attach string. So I may call it either Smart Steer or more or less an auto combo. I'm actually prefer not to call it auto combo because not all of them will actually, if anything, combo together. They just all have different purposes and gaps. But getting back to Light Attack has the ability to kind of re-loop itself. If you do a standing Light Attack and a crouching Light Attack, you pretty much can keep doing that back and forth. Almost similar to, I think, now I'm not going to say Melted Blood Reverse Beat, but overall it is a chain that you can basically keep doing periodically. And what's actually good about that is Phantom Breaker is actually a game that has a lot of clashing situations going on. And some situations could be hard to determine what is the best course of action. So if you just want to keep a non-stop offense, then Light Attack will be your ideal button to stick around with. Not only that, but when you do jump Light Attack, your character would do a poking animation, or excuse me, majority of the character would do a poking animation that's consistently and stays active for the duration of the jump. So pretty much is your jump media attack, which is actually a pretty good tactic to use if you're trying to either force a clash situation or even just plain out okay situation where you need meaty. Moving forward now we have your medium button. Medium button pretty much kind of stands in between light and fierce, has moderate hit stun, does moderate damage, moderate guard stun. But what's at least significant about your medium button is the fact that when you press forward in medium, you will get your character's universal overhead. Actually, I need to reiterate that statement. That's most characters' overhead. There are actually at least one or two characters who actually don't get an overhead, but at least some other additional property we do forward and medium. But again, this is where you will get your overhead, and Phantom Breaker is actually gets pretty overhead happy when it comes to a lot of your different chains and attacks having overhead properties. But my bad, I think I kind of digressed for a second, so let me get back on track. So at least that's what medium does for most people. Now when it comes to the fierce attack button, fierce attack, well, usually crouch and fierce will be your character's universal sweep. At least that's for most characters, at least 80% of it. I think there's at least two who do not have a sweep with their down and fierce. But not only that, you also have forward and fierce, which will also be usually an additional overhead for your character, but usually one that has more range, slower but more range. So that's actually going to wrap up at least the buttons. You don't really need to think too much further when it comes to that button layout. However, what does need to be pointed out is that the special button. Now, the special button, how should I say this? It pretty much is, as it kind of says, special. When you press the SP button in a direction, either it's forward, down, or back, you'll perform your character's signature special. Usually the forward and special will either be a projectile or rush attack. Your down version will either be usually some type of reversal move most of the time. And then back and special will be, how should I say it? Usually an anti-clash technique, if that kind of makes any sense. Pretty much you want to use your back and special button to pretty much beat clash situation if your character has a good clash attack. But let's move forward from that. But there's actually one more significant thing about the special button. When you press special button by itself without any direction, you will get your character's counter burst. Now, counter burst, how should I say this? I'm not sure if people are familiar with the built-in cafes fighting called Asuka 120 Degrees, but that was a fighting game made way back in the early days from a company named Built-in Cafe, and it was one of their series signature mechanic called blowback. No, not blowback, knockback attack. It was an attack that where you have more or less a considerable amount of armor, did impressive damage, and usually will, again, knock, as it says, sorry, as the name, knock back your opponent. Now, they modified that in Phantom Breaker, where some will actually still knock back, or some will actually launch characters. It all varies from what your character does with it. But the main significant change from counter burst from knockback attack is the fact that when it does when opponents do hit, it actually does a clash now. I wasn't sure if the Asuka series actually had much of a clash game to speak of, but in Phantom Breaker, it does cause a clash situation, which the game called it offset. Offset becomes a very significant thing in Phantom Breaker since the game has a lot of situations where offsets do occur. I was writing a guide on how to kind of deal with the offset situation, but more or less the best thing to be aware about offsetting is that you usually have four options how you want to handle offset. Two of them being offensive and two of them being defensive. When an offset has occurred, your first your first option, if you want to be offense, is to do low attacks because low attacks have little to no clashing. So most of the time, they will be a person's offensive situation. Not only that, but you also have your dash attack, which also kind of really helps deal with offsetting with your opponent. Since dash attack also usually has some type of clash situation. For defense, you will ultimately want to just use your maneuver options, such as a high jump or a back dash. Sometimes you can use forward dash, but there is a lot of risk to be involved with that since forward dash will put you in a counter hit state. And Phantom Breaker counter hit states can potentially be very dangerous and lead to a lot of devastating combos moving forward from there. Let's see now. Actually, now those are the pretty much primary uses of buttons. But actually, I do need to mention something about special buttons. And Phantom Breaker, you actually usually have three specials. Sorry, about three. So there's three levels of special. You have your medium version, which is just with the special button alone. But if you combine the special button with your light attack, then you'll get a light version of your character special. And then if you use it with the fierce button, then you'll get an ES version of your character special, which will require at least 100% of your, not 100%, at least one full bar in Phantom Breaker. Now, do you have any questions right now, Killer Ross, or how are you ready for me to keep going?
Well, so far your explanation of what the button attacks do is pretty in-depth. I know that you're struggling a little bit trying to get your point across, which is fine. Now, my question is, this is for anybody who is new to Phantom Breaker. They see this awesome anime 2D fighter, it looks super complex, and you have these three different styles of play, quick, hard, extra, and let's say you've never played fighting games before, or you're just not sure what playstyle will be efficient. If you were to introduce somebody to the game, what playstyle would you recommend them starting with first?
Well, then I'll actually definitely have to pick the one that's usually the most popular. That'll be quick style. Reason why is because quick style gives you the most freedom out of all the different styles. Main reason why quick style, as I said, gives you most freedom. Your chain combos will more or less usually chain easily and effectively. Your offensive power from quick, since quick does give, as I say, a modifier to guard stun. Sorry, not guard stun. Allow me to say this. When you choose quick style, all your attacks does a lot of guard damage. In other words, you can usually get guard crush much more faster when you are using quick style. So easy offense is possible. Not only that, the defense side is also pretty easy since when you have quick style, you have the option to use dash, high jump, and back dash as your guard cancel. So overall, you can still more or less keep doing the same thing you want to do if you're being pressure. Not only that, quick style does have slip shift dodge. That is the, how should I say it? It's called nullify attack and phantom breaker. But for the sake of people who may not really know what that really means, I'm just going to say it's a dodge. It's a dodge technique that you can do when your opponent's attack is about to hit you. You'll pretty much step to the side and dodge with a little bit of, how should I say, slow down period. That gives you enough. That'll give you enough time to assess the situation and choose the appropriate action going forward. And not only that, but there is a double jump, which I know most people are usually are the most comfortable with dealing with when it comes to active fighting games. Since if you have played, Guilty Gear, Blaze Blue, or Kingdom Hearts, most of the games always have double jump, so you'll feel very comfortable at home. Though, admittedly, there is no air dash. That's what I do need to point out. There is no air dash in Phantom Breaker, which I understand a lot of people find that weird from most active fighting games, but yes, there is no air dash in Phantom Breaker, and for good reasons, because high jump is a very, very strong mechanic in Phantom Breaker. For starters, high jump, unlike most older fighting games, at least have a significant, how should I say, startup before you actually start. While in Phantom Breaker, it's instant. Once you high jump, your character is already immediately in the air. Not only that, but your character actually is more or less impervious to a few attacks during that actual time of jumping off the ground. So you can more or less allowed to just keep high jumping with little to no repercussions unless your opponent actually knows you're doing this and actually seeks to, if anything, anti-air you. But yes, that's the reason why I'm going to say quick style is the probably most likely style that most new people should get involved with, because it's the one that gives you the most control and has the most easiest options. However, I will admit this, while quick style is the most easiest of the style to use, at the same time, it also has most of the disadvantage to, well, how should I say, technical disadvantages. In fact, I'm not going to say technical, let's just say disadvantages that the other styles can use, the other styles can exploit. But that's once you actually start understanding Phantom Breaker or understand fighting games in general and start looking out for those, how should I say, weaknesses.
Alrighty, so the vote is in. Definitely focus on quick style. Um, Now, moving along really quickly, I remember you mentioned in the Phantom Duel Facebook page that there were some interesting things you found out and probably dropped a few points on some characters. So I think the time is now to explain a bit of what those things are.
I see. Very well, very well. Well, this is actually referring to what we discussed a little bit earlier when I said I was doing some videos that I was going to discuss some of the mechanics. One thing I did came to find out is the wake-up system, or the wake-up system or recovery, however you choose to want to call it, has a lot of significant differences. Phantom Breaker actually has, how should I say, 4 different types of wake-up systems or wake-ups at play. You have, sorry, let me not say wake-up, recovery. My apologies, I mean recovery system. There's actually 4 different types of recovery to be had in Phantom Breaker. You have your air recovery, which allows you to recover in the air. And what's good about air recovery is that once you do recover in the air, in a matter of, I'd say, maybe 1 or 2 seconds, you are allowed to assume control of your character and choose to attack if you want to attack. Of course, the disadvantage of that is once you do actually attack, you will no longer be, how should I say, impervious or invisible to your opponent's oncoming attack. At the same time, you can also choose to air recover and wait till you land on the ground, which you will keep your full visibility until you reach the ground level. Then the next recovery we do have is actually ground recovery. Looks pretty identical to air recovery, except your character will kind of just get back to your feet on the ground. The probably most easiest reference is probably see Blaze Blue's ground recovery. Once the character usually hits the ground and press a button, they'll kind of just bounce back on their feet. So that's probably a better indication to see how ground recovery is. Not only that, we do then have quick stand up and a tech roll. As they probably, as the name sounds, stand up allows you to stand up quickly once you reach ground level, And tech roll is more than the same thing as stand up, but your character will actually roll away from your opponent, still retaining some of the visibility that comes with those. The reason why I say some characters actually went a drop down is one particular character who's Makoto, who ironically, while I will first say she was to be the first character that most people would play with, I may have to now disregard that because she has a certain glitch that seems to keep her from doing the standing wake up properly. And there are actually strategies that I can use. Sorry, there are strategies that opponents can use to exploit that of her, more or less giving her a significant problem. If you want a better if you want a better understanding of what I'm speaking, if people are familiar with Street Fighter, for example, I know how most people may be aware of the fact that once Ryu, the main character of the game, the Shoto, once he experiences a knockdown, usually your first option to do when getting back up, if you want to get your opponent off of you from applying any type of offense, you will use your Shoryuken. Basically, for Makoto, this is just not good for her at all. It was just not work for her quite well because this glitch will more or less force her to more or less have a delay in doing her stand up. And with that delay, your opponents can actually use that opportunity to, if anything, exploit her. So that's the reason why Mikoto has dropped in my character ranking. Actually, the next character who may also will drop will possibly be Finn, who I actually had as the second strongest character, most likely due to the fact that, how should I say this? In fact, the wake up system more or less gives you a better opportunity of dealing with her projectile game because projectile game is Finn's specialty. But with the wake up system, knowing how it actually works and operates, you can more or less bypass a lot of her projectiles if you're willing to take a few hits. Because once you get your knockdown, you got to use your tech roll or overall your quick stand up to really start applying some better offense against her. For some other few characters, well, I think I might just hold off on that information for now because I'm still looking to test a few things. But that was probably the main information I really wanted to touch on. But actually, I guess I will point this out. If you did remember my character ranking, I did have the characters Kokowa and Tokia a little bit, on the low end side, usually being ranked around C or B. Well, I'm about to kind of lift them up to now being near where the top tier characters are, since once you understand how the wake up system works and how to exploit it, these are the characters who know how to more or less deal with the wake up system more or less on the most consistent basis. Though I'll still say people's favorite Kirisu, she's definitely still top because she's just, well, Kirisu.
Now, I was going to say in regards to Kurisu, at one point, before our first actual tournament, there was a nice little bug with her, where you could infinitely throw a character, as you remember.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, I believe with the update, they made it so she could only do it, I think, one or three, no, three times, and also harder to pull off.
Um, yes and no, almost. The thing is, what the update had did for her was the update did change how her grab property work. However, she still actually does have another version of that loop. It's just due to how that loop is designed, she can only get at least now 2 to 3 repetitions off it, and that's actually only on a few characters. However, I will not go as far to say that even what makes Kirisu top, because even once that glitch was removed, Kirisu is still ultimately just a very strong character. Main reason is that she's actually one of the few characters who can set play in Phantom Breaker. And before I probably throw people off what set play means, set play basically, more or less, she doesn't need to change her strategy. She can basically just keep doing what she plans to do because her stuff is just that strong. Now, that's not to say that she actually completely dominates. No, there are things that can beat her strategy, but at the same time, if you have a counter strategy to her strategy, she does also have another solution to that counter strategy as well. And in fact, Phantom Breaker, as a game that I say that's more meter reliant, once she at least has 1 meter, you more or less can never really pressure her safely because she's one of the few characters who has a guard council, or I might use Street Fighter terms, alpha council, that's more or less always guaranteed to work, as well as I say, just safe overall. She more or less doesn't need to put herself in harm's way as long as she has meter. So yeah.
Alrighty. Now, was there anything else that you found recently in Phantom Breaker Extra that no one else has been able to, what's the word, fully tap into, aside from a few exploits from Mikoto and Finn, and then Kurisu at the time?
I see. Well, I feel it's exploits. I don't know if I could say even found, discover. Um, it's a little difficult for me to even say if no people even found or even know about these stuff because unfortunately, Phantom Breaker still has more or less little to no activity from what I can see from videos and whatnot. I did recently just came across Phantom Breaker. I did recently came across Phantom Breaker's another code video, match videos, and I see that there are some people who are competent about the game's mechanics, or at least a few aspects, but still not exactly, how should I say, got the gist of a few other things. And in fact, now that you mention it, I think I do know what I will point out. In Phantom Breaker, when you do stand still, you will guard, or even press back to, you will still guard. At the same time, if you just hold down, you will also guard. And I see that a lot of people, excuse me, I see that players would like to just crouch guard a lot, which is actually usually the common strategy you do in most other fighting games because low attacks are usually, the quickest attack. However, in Phantom Breaker, missiles are very, very fast for both high and low. Is for most part, you actually pretty much just have to, in a sense, guess if you think your opponent will be doing a high and low. And there are situations where high and low can become quite consistent. Kyusu actually has a very good one with her medium attack and dash attack. But not only that, the thing I also need to point out is guard low will actually weaken your guard meter faster. In fighting games, usually your guard meter only got weakened as your opponent kept attacking. However, in Phantom Breaker, if you just continue to down crouch attacks that are not actually low attacks, you will suffer a guard crush sooner because that's considered, how should I say, wrong blocking. You should not guard a low. You should not be guarding low against an attack that does just regular, not even a low attack, because you will suffer a guard crush sooner. Not only that, when you do down crouch, you actually cut off your ability to do your alpha counters. So yeah, for the most part, do not make a habit of just down crouching attacks if it's not actually necessary because you will suffer guard crush sooner. And that is one of the weaknesses of quick style. Quick style is the style that has the weakest guard gauge. It only takes actually, if anything, two of opponents maybe multi-hitting special to kind of get instant guard crush. So be wary of that. Another thing also be mindful of that is supers. All supers are air unblockable. So if your opponent has 100% stock, not do not, but rather be wary of jumping around, especially if your opponent got a super that can have the range to hit you in the air because, again, supers are air unblockable. Not only that, be mindful that overdrive. I see people like to use overdrive a lot consistently and try to use that as their combo opportunity. Be aware that when you overdrive, when you overdrive and you attack your opponent in overdrive state, they will get significantly extra meter because overdrive puts you in a state where you're considered, as I say, special. All your attacks will basically have special properties. By special property, as in, it just considered special. Like, damage, right? If someone uses specials on them, well, basically your punch would do chip damage because it's considered a special. And again, because your attack is a special, it basically gives a lot of additional meter to your opponent. So if your overdrive, for whatever reason, does not kill your opponent, have you done, let's say, a 15-hit combo on your opponent during overdrive state, normally your opponent, let's say you did that same combo but not in overdrive, they got, let's say, 25% meter. If you're in overdrive, you pretty much already gave them a full meter from doing your combo. Actually, I think a good example of that would be how King of Fighters 13, are you familiar with that?
Yes.
In the high level play, even though it's very possible to do long combos effortlessly in King of Fighters 13, most of the time from tournament and strong players, they will wait until either the last round to really use that because If they do that same combo and it wasn't the last round, they just kind of gave their opponent now the arsenal to do the same thing to them. So basically, the rule is this: if you overdrive, make sure you will kill your opponent. And well, actually, make sure it will not kill, but let me not use that word kill. Make sure that it will secure you the victory, because if it does not, you're probably going to wind up giving your opponent the opportunity to do the same to you. So be mindful of that.
Alright, folks, we unfortunately have reached the 30-minute marker of our first podcast session. I want to thank K-Bas for joining us and taking the time to explain a bit about Phantom Breaker and its mechanics.
Thank you for having me, Kilderos. It was a pleasure. If we are to do this in the future, I'll make sure to have a better, as I say, template of everything.
Yes, unfortunately, this was kind of on the fly, so we don't have any awesome music or awesome backgrounds. But hopefully, when we do our next podcast, we will have more guests on board and more things to talk about. Is there anything else you want to say real quick, K-Bass, before we head out?
Yes, well, again, thank you for having me on board. Just like to point out that Phantom Breaker is a pretty good game. Regardless of what the scrutiny that some people may say, the game is nowhere near sloppy. I have to actually applaud Five Bases in Power and the other development team on it for actually making an actually well-crafted game. Now, I will admit that it's definitely not exactly perfect. There are issues or concerns that could more or less be a bit of a turn off. But I will say this: as far as anything, gameplay is definitely solid and consistent, and it's definitely worth anybody's time who's either interested in fighting games or just even want a game that's, if anything, added to their collection. So, once again, thank you for having me on board. I look forward to the next time, if there is a next time.
All right, and for the folks who have Facebook, you can follow us at Phantom Duel, two words. We do try to have Phantom Breaker extra sessions, mostly on 360 or PS3, and on occasion 360, and hopefully we'll soon have Battlegrounds content. All right, this is going to be the end of episode 1. Take care, see you soon, and yeah, see ya.